Hello and welcome to another episode of Versus on the Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Today we have a match for you guys between Orcust and Salamangreat, two major decks, especially in the UK competitive scene, that are going to be featured heading into this format. Here's the Orcust list. It's a fairly standard going first version of the list. What do we have? 9 hand traps here, some spell and trap removal to deal with the harder encounters of the deck, and actually playing 3 copies of Callplay and 3 Nightmare. As you may have seen from the UK Nats videos, this has been chosen as like an option for dealing with hand traps essentially. On the other side for Salamangreat, again a very sort of standard typical list. 6 real hand traps plus 3 Phantasmae. Desires in here too, which means maxing out on a lot of the other cards, but having that increased Salamangreat count does mean that you're more likely to be able to get off your plays into a more consistent space, especially given how the deck has been weakened since Circle has gone to 1. Pretty heavy Salamangreat trap lineup, but not much else to say about it there. For the extra deck option, going for the Borreload rather than the Avramax, I believe. So that's it for the deck list. Let's get into these games. So game 1, Orcust has won the die roll and is going to be kicking off with a Vishuddha summon, but not going for the link because there's no point if there's nothing to remove from the opposing field. We see the Armageddonite there gets Veiled. So having that extra monster means that plays can be made via going into the Mermaid rather than just going off the typical like 3 summon into a Galatea. So we see here the Nightmare sort of was in hand, I believe, so there was no easy option here to just go into the Harp and Skeleton process. So a bit of a strange end board in this situation. The Galatea here is also going to be hit by a Veiler, I believe, not being able to shuffle back that World Wand, which leaves the Orcust player in a bit of a pickle, not being able to get the additional value off that Galatea, so there's no interruptions during the opponent's turn with that Babel, but there is 1 set and a Longyear put onto the table, which is a potential threat, just having that back row there. On the opposing side, Spinny and a Foul kick things off. Pretty decent way to start, but obviously it's not the best opening. We have a Bale here, and when that gets summoned it's going to trigger and be hit by a Ghost Ogre, so immediately losing that 1 monster is a bit unfortunate. It means that the Spinny will have to be used in a sort of unconventional, rather annoying way in order to get the plays going. So we do see that that's going to happen here. The Spinny comes back, the Foul gets turned into a Balinx, and then the Will is going to bring back that Foul in order to have a decent way to deal with the back row, and the Spinny will also come back as another resource. So the Foul here is going to be used in order to deal with the back row because you don't want to be facing down a crescendo threat. It's just too much of a problem for the deck to face. That is going to get rid of the Foul, of course, but that's not too much of an issue because there's still the option for a Sunlight Wolf to come out here. And that Sunlight Wolf can then recur the Will, which is now in the grave sent by the Foul. So not too bad at all, although maybe the Foul could have just been sent on its own. Of course, the only actual thing to be added back at this point was the Will, so it didn't have a big trade-off there, in essence, which is not too bad, to be honest. On the opposing side, in the when the turn starts, we see Harp is going to be activated, summoning out a Skeleton. The Sunlight Wolf is now linked, which means that it can be got rid of with the Longyear by shuffling back 2 of those machines, which is not too bad at all. So we see the Wand, and I believe the Nightmare being put away. That gets rid of the Wolf, and it means that there is now potentially an opening to start getting some damage in, and not having to deal with interrupts. You know, already we see that the Salamangreat board totally empty apart from the field spell. There's just nothing there recurring. I believe there's still at least 1 Bale within the grave for protection for future plays, but that does rely on surviving past his turn. Already 2 hand traps have been used up, so the hand is very weak from the Salamangreat side of things as well. So a bit unfortunate there was no way to sort of trigger get through to the Gazelle. Just not as consistent in this current version of the deck, unfortunately. So a double attack in, the Longisu and the Dingisu being turned into a Bomber Dragon here. That gives the ability to board wipe, essentially, for free, because the skeleton is in the grave as well. But on the opposing side, Desires comes down. It has been very useful for getting a lot of Salamangreat players out of the sticky situations like this that they could be in, turning that 1 card in hand into 3 cards. But will it be enough? Well, the new card, there is a Mining there, which is not too bad at all. There's no negate available on the other side, no Ash here. So that's going to be able to add the Gazelle, I believe, get the summon off and trigger the effect, but there is a Ghost Ogre. In order to maintain Salamangreat presence on the board, that's going to be met by the Balelings, which will protect it, but that does mean that all of the main monster zones are now open up to a bomber attack, which is very difficult for the Salamangreat player to deal with at this point. They can't just leave the board as it is because it's not strong enough to combat the opponent. They do have to start actually making plays here. And there is a Raging Grave potentially could be added back later on. But we see as soon as the wheel comes down and brings back that Sunlight Wolf, it will be met by the skeleton, summoning out the Longisu, board wiping, and putting Orcust very far ahead. And that's going to wrap up game 1. So moving into game 2, Salamangreat gets the option to starting off with Circle is always pretty nice, to be honest. So that 2 of Gazelle now. So yeah, really good here actually. We have Spinny and Gazelle is the typical line of play, which means we can expect to see at least a rank 4 coming out of this board. I believe there is a way to get rank 4 Trap out of this as well. So here we see the Sanctuary being added. Gazelle sending the Jaguar. That's to play around the Veiler or Ash that could hit the Stalio at this point, and allow recursion later on. It's really crucial actually. If your Stalio does get hit by these hand traps and you don't have a way into your Jaguar, you can really struggle to recur in these situations. So sometimes it is better to just send that with your Gazelle instead. We see the linking off into the first copy of Sunlight Wolf. And then the Sanctuary will come down, and that will allow the linking into the second one so that the Jaguar can reset the Sunlight Wolf rather than just resetting the Stalio. As you've seen from the beginning of this video, there are 2 Stalios in the extra deck anyway, so it's not too much of a problem to leave that 1 Stalio in the grave. Of course, this does mean that the Sunlight Wolf is more susceptible to hand traps, but there haven't been any so far. It's very unlikely that they're going to be hitting at this point. And the only thing it can add back, unfortunately, is the Circle there. But that does mean there is still a Dweller, which generally means game over for Orcust in this point. We see 1 card set and then Desires being resolved. That's going to be really good at this point. You know, you've already got Jaguar, Falco, and Gazelle all pulled out of the deck. And then you're just getting another +1 off this Desires. Not bad at all. But it doesn't look like it leads to any additional sets. So players passed onto the Orcust side, kicking things off with an instant fusion in order to attempt to bait out this back row or any hand traps. And using the effect on the Sunlight Wolf is in fact met by the Roar here. So one thing you'll notice, the Salamangreat Circle wasn't set. That is a misplay. It should have been set at this point because there's a Falco there which could reset it. There's just a bunch of reasons why it should have been set. Unfortunately it wasn't, so misplay on this side. We see Dweller coming down as soon as it's safe from a Gamma. Really good actually to play around potential Gammas sided in. And an unfortunate discard here of the Nightmare, so not being able to summon one from deck. I believe that the Orcust hand includes 2 copies of Nightmare at this point. 3 copies of Nightmare, so really awkward hand. No way of dealing with that, unfortunately, so those monsters just get turned into... the Mermaid gets turned into Mermaid and Ibly, and that gets turned into the Phoenix. Obviously not choosing to, not being able to trigger the Ibly because of the Dweller. And the Phoenix will pop the Roar, which was reset with the Falco there. That does net a draw, which can potentially fix up the hand here, but it doesn't look like there's going to be anything in it. So the Phoenix just punches over the Dweller. 3 cards are set, and then play is passed back. So not the best return salvo from the Orcust side here, which means that Salamangreat can now capitalize on the weakness of the Orcust. Activating that circle obviously should have been said earlier, but having the search here is at least something to go off. It would have been popped anyway off the Phoenix, so I guess you can say that it only would have netted one search, ultimately. There is an impermanence here, though, which is going to potentially be a problem, hitting that Sunlight Wolf rather preemptively. And then a new Sunlight Wolf comes down, and the Jaguar is still in the grave, so that means that there's a new way to trigger this one off and potentially add back some useful stuff out of the graveyard. However, it's quite early in the turn. It's not often the best thing to trigger your Sunlight Wolf before you've got your plays going, but getting that advantage can be absolutely crucial if you're intending to go into one of your bigger monsters. So it looks like we're going to see a Helio here in order to deal with a double back row, because there's nothing else that's actually threatening from the side of the Orcust player here. So first off, Helio comes down, spins away a back row. It turns out to be called by the grave, which is going to banish... well, there's a ton of stuff it can actually banish here, so it looks like it's going to go for the Sunlight Wolf to try and stop any further recursion. That shouldn't be too much of a problem, to be honest. And then we see the Helio going into another Helio. Now, this is, of course, a little bit wrong. It triggers the Gazelle here. So this Helio should have been summoned using multiple Salamangreat monsters, because it can actually be summoned off that field spell, since the field spell already was used for the Sunlight Wolf. So the board should be changed up slightly a bit from here, but the Gazelle could have been summoned at an earlier point anyway, and it sends the Rage, which just puts Salamangreat in such a strong position where Raw and Rage are now in the graveyard. There's still the ability to recur resources with the Falco in the grave to bring back that Gazelle into hand, and there are just numerous ways to build up advantage. So we're going to see Orcust taking the defeat there and moving into game 3, keeping advantage of the time, of course, because we don't want to go too deep into time with these two decks. Neither one of them is a huge fan of it, and the Orcust list in particular makes use of the instant fusion. So, kicking things off with a Mathematician coming down, the usual play is to get the Galatea out in the least number of summons possible. Does keep you safe from Nibiru, potentially. And then, even from here, setting the field spell. And in case you haven't already seen it, definitely go and watch the deck profile from Matt Chen discussing his top 8 Brotherhood list, which was in fact Go Second Orcust, when he discusses this very thing, that you can actually summon out your Winder and protect it with Dingirsu, all while being safe from a Nibiru, provided you've made your initial summon with like a Mathematician or a Scrap Recycler or something like that, because the Galatea comes out in 3 summons, Winder is 4th, at which point your opponent just cannot Nibiru you. So you're totally free from that. And this is actually a great spot to be in from the Orcust side of things. We saw the Floodgate come from the Salamangreat side last time. This time it's coming from the Orcust side, and the Harp is able to trigger here, putting a Nightmare onto the board, and the Dingirsu obviously protecting the window once again in the end phase. But it won't be able to protect it anymore. That instant fusion is going to keep on hitting it over and over again, so 2 protects, and that means that this turn we're going to expect to see it linked off, right away. Going into a Galatea. Nothing to add back, of course, because it was summoned off the instant fusion rather than Shadow fusion, but not too much of a problem. That's still an extra resource and extra capability of being able to put more summons onto the table. Because of the Winder being summoned in the previous turn, the Salamangreat board is exceptionally weak. You know, it's 1 back row, 1 monster set, which generally should be fairly easy for Orcust to be able to beat, provided they get to enough extenders. And as we've seen there, the Phoenix discarding the wand is potentially enough, because it means that there's now a Galatea plus a monster onto the field. And I believe there's still a whole bunch of resources available left in the graveyard. Just setting the crescendo there. Of course, this isn't playing around the Ghost Ogre, but you can't actually play around the Ghost Ogre in quite the same way with the setup. So we see the Borosword come out, and there's a skeleton in the graveyard which can bring out Galatea, and from there Dingirsu gets rid of the face down, and then that is going to be enough to take game. So Orcust winning this match 2-1, a very tough fought battle. We see that floodgates on both sides have a really drastic impact in this particular matchup, the kind of thing that they wouldn't do in other particular matchups, you know, in Striker and potentially against Thunder. The floodgates that were put out here aren't necessarily as strong as they would be, but for these matchups, Winder and Dweller are absolutely crucial to deciding who will actually win, and of course the dice roll can have a massive impact if you're considering that time is going to be a factor and you have to cut your games to a shorter position. So thanks very much for watching this video. Be sure to head into the description and check out Tier 0 Games for all of your Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs and use code Yazzie5 YGJoe to get a discount. No Yazzie in this video, but I'm sure we'll be seeing it in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.